You're listening to the Immortal Icons of Dance podcast. I'm your host, Lauren Johnson. This past summer, Immortal Icons of Dance celebrated the 50th anniversary of Michael Bennett's chorus line. I interviewed several original cast members, as well as several iconic Cassies of all generations. My research was even featured in the official chorus line 50th anniversary concert at the Schubert Theater, where a few photos that I sourced were used in the In Memoriam video honoring original cast members who are no longer with us. It was an honor to be able to contribute to that special and historic evening, and a thrill to see something I had contributed on the Schubert Theater stage. I was invited backstage before the dress rehearsal on the day of the concert to meet the costume team and view the costumes. I even got to touch Robert Lapone's original Zack sweater. It was incredible watching the dress rehearsal and seeing the raw emotion on stage in every number. If you'd like to get a behind-the-scenes look at this dress rehearsal, I recorded all of my observations that afternoon and published them as a blog post in the vault. You can find these posts by visiting immortaliconsofdance.com/vault and selecting the chorus line category. Speaking of publishing, I wrote my debut article for Playbill, which was featured on their website, and detailed the experiences of 5 iconic Cassies: Donna McKechnie, Charlotte D'Amboise, Robin Herder, Jessica Lee Golden, and Sarah Bowden. It was a very exciting summer for all of us chorus line lovers. But now it's time to learn about another show that opened in 1975 and celebrates its 50th anniversary this year. And that show is Bob Fosse's Chicago. Chicago and a chorus line opened in the same season, but that was not originally supposed to be the case. Chicago was postponed by several months when, in the first week of rehearsals, Fosse needed to undergo bypass surgery on his heart. By the time he recuperated and rehearsals resumed, the timeline for the show had been pushed into the next Broadway season, which meant both shows would be competing at the Tony Awards against each other. Although both shows were nominated for 13 awards, Chorus Line walked away with 10, and Chicago was 0. Despite this, Chicago still had a respectable run, lasting 2 years and 2 months, or 936 performances on Broadway. Featuring some of the greatest talents of the generation, the show was directed and choreographed by Bob Fosse, starred Gwen, Verdon, Chita, Rivera, and Jerry Orbach, and had music and lyrics by John Kander and Fred Ebb. The set design was by Tony Walton and costumes by Patricia Ziprot. Each of these people were giants in their profession. I've done a feature on each of these artists' contributions to Chicago, which again, you can read at immortaliconsofdance.com/vault. This time selecting the Chicago category. One of the most fascinating parts about researching the show has been learning that Chicago is not just 50 years old, it's really 100. Okay, stick with me here. The characters Roxie and Velma are based on 2 real-life women in 1924 named Beulah and Belva, both of whom murdered their lovers and were in the custody of the Cook County Jail in Illinois. There really was a jail matron like Mama Morton, there really was a gullible husband like Amos, and there were really other murderesses in the cell block. There was even a slick lawyer like Billy Flynn who got his clients acquitted. And how do we know this? Because of a woman named Maureen Dallas Watkins, who was a reporter for the Chicago Tribune at the time. She covered the trials of these women in a time before television or social media, when newspapers were the primary form of information but also entertainment. The newspaper with the most sensational headlines sold more papers. Maureen recorded the trials in impeccable detail, even recording the women's glamorous outfits and demeanor on the stand. When you read the articles and headlines, if you're familiar with the script of Chicago, you would be shocked to see how many lines and lyrics and scenarios were taken directly from these news reportings. And that's because, after just 8 months of working as a reporter, Maureen quit, citing that all the murders she was covering were starting to get to her. She started praying for, quote, good murders to come along for her to write about, and that's when she knew it was time to get out. But she used her experiences to write her first play. Her play was titled Chicago. It opened on Broadway in 1926 at the Music Box Theater and ran for 172 performances, with our beloved characters Roxie, Velma, and all the rest. Just sans music. The play was adapted into a silent film by Cecil B. DeMille in 1927, and again adapted into a 20th Century Fox film in 1942, this time titled Roxie Hart, starring Ginger Rogers. It was Gwen Verdon who watched the Ginger Rogers film and then read the original play and knew that this was a project that she and Fosse should bring to life in the form of a musical. They approached Maureen Watkins in order to buy the rights to adapt the play into a musical, but Maureen refused. I've read and heard different versions of this story, but Marcia Bagwell says that she heard this directly from Bob and Gwen, that Maureen promised them the rights under the condition that it couldn't be performed until after Maureen's death. When she did pass in 1969, the rights were transferred to Maureen's mother. When her mother passed, the rights were transferred to her agent. It was only then that Gwen was given first right of refusal on the material. So they bought the right and began developing the musical in 1974 when progress stalled due to Fosse's heart problems. I know that was a lot of backstory, but what can you expect when a project is 100 years old? I highly recommend you head over to the vault later to see the photos, interviews, footage on all the subjects that I've just talked about. I'll include a link to the vault in the show notes of this episode. Today I'll be speaking to Lenora Nemetz. Lenora first appeared on Broadway in the original Hal Prince production of Cabaret with Lottie Lenya. Next, Lenora was simultaneously the standby for both Gwen Verdon and Chita Rivera in the original Broadway production of Chicago, which means she would go on in the role of Roxie or Velma at a moment's notice, and she did on many occasions. Lenora was right there in the room learning straight from the source as Bob Fosse developed the material for the show. And ultimately, Lenora went on to replace Chita as Velma Kelly when Chita left the show. Lenora received a Drama Desk nomination for her performance as Dolores Dante in Stephen Schwartz's Broadway production of Studs Terkel's Working. In 1979, she starred opposite Peter Allen in Up in One. Lenora was again reunited with Chita Rivera and Liza Minnelli while standing by for Liza in Kander and Ebb's The Rink. She appeared at the New York City Opera as Gladys in the revival of Pajama Game, and as Miss Cratchit and Miss Mazeppa, the trumpet-playing stripper, in the acclaimed Tony Award-winning revival of Gypsy, directed by Arthur Lawrence. Lenora was also a standby for Patti LuPone as Mama Rose. Her Broadway national tours include Bob Fosse's Sweet Charity, Bye Bye Birdie, opposite Tommy Tune, the Sam Mendes-Rob Marshall revival of Cabaret, and Some Like It Hot with Tony Curtis. Lenora continues teaching and passing on what she knows with the Verdon Fosse legacy, as well as at studios and schools in the Pittsburgh area where she resides. I hope you enjoy our conversation. On today's episode of Immortal Icons of Dance, we're joined by Lenora Nemetz, who's here to talk with us about the original production of Chicago, which opened on Broadway 50 years ago. So welcome, Lenora.
Oh, thank you. It's wonderful to be here, Lauren.
So let's start at the beginning. I first want to know, how did you first begin dancing?
Oh, well, that was a long time ago. I don't remember walking and talking. I remember singing and dancing, and I think my mother, I was pigeon-toed, and the doctor told my mother to take me to ballet school. So I went to dancing school, and I was about 3 years old. Because when I walked, I would trip a lot, Yeah. And that's how I started.
Did you study ballet, tap, jazz? What all did you study?
All of it, everything, ballet, tap, jazz, acrobatics. In those days, that's what you studied.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who were your early inspirations? Was it teachers that you saw, older students, or people that you saw on stage or screen?
Well, I think I would see people on in movies and on TV. I wasn't aware of Gwen and Cheetah until later
Mm-hmm.
when when I was tiny, a tiny little girl. I remember seeing Calamity Jane with Doris Day, and she was brilliant in that film, brilliant. And I had the recording, and I would imitate her, and all of the furniture would be the different places that she performed in the movie. All of the older girls at the dancing studio. And I lived in a neighborhood where the dancing school was very close to where I lived. So I would go in the morning and take class with the young girls and then stay all day and
Mm.
watch the classes. And my teacher, I would sit in it was in a mansion. Imagine that going to, it was fabulous on the north side of Pittsburgh. And you went up these gigantic staircase to go to the ballroom. And then there were all these huge dance studios. And every room had a giant fireplace. So I would sit, in the fireplace because they weren't using them. There were giant fireplaces like you see in the old movies. And I would just watch. And finally, my instructor, Andrea, she said, "Why don't you come and take this class too?" So I would take the other classes as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent a lot of time there, a lot of time. It was wonderful.
Connect the dots for me then between your early dancing years and how you came to New York. What was your journey?
It was never a question that singing and dancing is what I wanted to do. Uh, when I would watch the Ed Sullivan Show, and I would see Gwen and Chita performing or other performers. But I remember Chita, really remember Chita doing a choreography that was so brilliant. Uh, and uh, I had a cabaret act when I was 15.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, I did. And I used to perform around the city, but made myself look a little bit older. And it was in the 60s. And my dance instructor used to bring us to New York to study in the summer. And we would see Broadway shows. And the first show that I saw was Gwen in Sweet Charity. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was sitting up in the balcony in the peanut heaven, and I had binoculars because I had seen her on the Ed Sullivan Show, and I thought, oh, I love her too. I love this woman. And then I saw her live, and it changed my life. That production changed my life. I thought, I just don't want to be a dancer. She's funny and she's an actress and she sings and she does all of these wonderful things. So I bought a top hat and a cane and I incorporated, if my friends could see me now, into my nightclub act, of course. And I did secondhand rows because I loved Barbara Streisand at that time. She was young and beginning. And everybody loved her because she was different. I loved Gwen because she was different. Chita because and I had my own act and I would do Broadway show tunes. And then I did summer stock in Pittsburgh. Some girls were going to New York. I just graduated high school, told my parents I wanted to go to New York and, see if I could be a dancer on Broadway. They were totally against it. They said, "You can't go, you're too young." I said, "Well, I'm 18, I can go." So I went, and I got in a show called uh, Gypsy, Gypsy,
Mm-hmm.
but it was at the Club Benet in New Jersey. That was my first job. And while I was doing that with Marianne Niles, who happened to be Bob's first wife,
Yeah.
uh, and while I was doing that show, I auditioned for Cabaret, the musical, and I got it. And that's how I got on Broadway. So I went to New York in September and I was in a Broadway show in November.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. I was very young though. I was very naive and immature. I came from Pittsburgh and I was working with a lot of people who were older than me, but I learned a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And our dance captain was Bonnie Walker, and she was brilliant. Well, she still is brilliant. And I worked with her again when we did Gypsy on Broadway with Patty.
Mm-hmm.
The one before Audra's.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So when before Cabaret, how did you first become aware of Bob Fosse?
I saw, I knew his choreography. I'd seen movies, I'd seen
Okay.
what Damn Yankees
Hmm.
and Pajama Game, and I loved those films. And I knew that he was a great choreographer. There was just something about him that that was wonderful. And of course, I started investigating and listening to a lot of recordings. After I saw Gwen, I started listening to Redhead and all of these. I'd go to the library because everything's so readily available on social media. But
Right.
when I was a child, you had to go, and a teenager, you had to go to the library and wait for it to come in, the recording to come in that somebody had had. It's because there was only one, and maybe one copy of the musical, the play. And I would go to the library and, just get these recordings and go to the studio and just make up my own choreography to these numbers, and I'd incorporate them into my cabaret act.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. Was
Now, tell me about your audition for Cabaret.
That was Ron Field, and that was great. We did the telephone. Well, it was an audition. Well, I wasn't going to audition. I had been to two auditions before that, and I thought, I'm not auditioning for this show. I've had it, because the first audition I wasn't a blonde, and the second audition I wasn't. I don't know what it was. I just got typed out,
Hmm.
and so. And one was for Come September with Agnes DeMille as the choreographer, and the other one was the revival of Carnival,
Mm.
and Gower Champion was choreographing that. I had the keys to the car that we used to go to the Club Benet.
Hmm.
Everybody drove in this car, this rental car, to the Club Benet, and it was parked in front of my apartment. So I had to return the keys. This story is complicated, but I'm going to try to do it as best I
Okay.
can
Okay.
without being too long. I had to return the keys to Dottie Lester, who was at the audition. So I went to the audition, and no, they were auditioning the male chorus at the time. The doorman was there, and I said, "Is there a ladies' room around that I can use?" I was going to wait for Dottie to show up and give her the keys,
Hmm.
and he said, "I'll just go in there." So I went into the Lottie Lenya's dressing room, because it was Lottie Lenya's dressing room, and used her bathroom. And when I came out, the stage manager was there. And he said to me, his name was Ed Aldrich. And he said, "What are you doing in the Stars dressing room?" And I said, "Well, I was just using the bathroom. The doorman told me I could use it." He said, "What are you doing in here? What are you doing in the Stars dressing room?" And he really thought that maybe I was stealing something.
Mm.
Uh, and I convinced him that I wasn't, and finally just said, "Well, I'm here to audition." And he said, "Oh, well, the audition's not until 2 o'clock, and your number's one. The bathroom's downstairs. Use that." So I auditioned for the show, and it turned out, and I got the show. It
Wow.
was like uh, the next, I auditioned, I never gave her the keys. She left. I didn't think I was going to get the job.
Huh?
I honestly didn't think I'd get that job. I thought that I'd be typed out again.
Right.
And, so you show up and you do your best, and finally, around, I guess, when they start eliminating people, I realized that it was down to like five of us. And then I saw that it was only two of us. And the other lady that was auditioning was Suzanne Rogers. And she's on a soap opera. And she was on that soap opera at the time that she was auditioning. And I used If My Friends Could See Me Now as my song. And when we finished, I had gotten the job. And she said to me, "I want to tell you that they called me and told me to show up for this audition because they wanted me. And I didn't get it. You did." She said, you should feel really good about yourself because she knew it was my first show.
Yeah,
She
wow.
knew it was, yeah. And that's how it happened for me with Cabaret. And it was, I felt like Marlo Thomas, in the that girl
Hmm.
when she comes out and she's walking on Broadway and all the lights are lit. When I went into the studio, when I went into the theater, the Broadway theater, it was sunny. And I came out, all the lights on Broadway were like lit, and that traffic was like crazy. And it was November, and it was just starting to get a little cold, and it was a glorious, glorious time. Yeah, it was a wonderful experience. I never forget it.
If you could sum up cabaret in one lesson that you learned, what was the biggest lesson that you learned from your Broadway debut?
I learned from Bonnie Walker. She taught me that the difference between a professional and not a professional is that you do things exactly. There are different styles, and you have to be able to pick up the style quickly. You have to do it exactly the way it's done, and then you incorporate yourself into that and bring the character to it. And that was really important for me to know. She would always say, it must be this way, Lenora. I will never forget her saying that. And the show was really uh, always clean, always right on. It was never sloppy because of her,
Mhm.
And that choreography was extremely hard and very unique and Tony Award winning. And that whole show was groundbreaking. It changed things on Broadway.
All right, so now take me to Chicago. Was was
Chicago.
there word on the street about this show developing, or was it just an audition notice? What was your first inkling that something was happening?
I was working in Pittsburgh again because I'm Pittsburgh. I'm a Pittsburgh girl. Anyway, I was working, and a friend of mine sent my picture and resume in, and we had heard about Chicago, and then that Gwen and Chita were going to be starring in it. But a friend of mine sent my picture and resume into Michael Shurtleff without me knowing. I was working on yet again another cabaret act, and um, he got a he got a call back from Michael and said, "Yeah, we'd love to see Lenora. Have her come in." And I knew Cheetah from doing shows with her in Summerstock, and I didn't know Gwen. I had met her once, and these were all things that happened in Pittsburgh. That how I met them. Um, and Bob had come to see Cabaret because a lot by when we were closing, he came a lot to see Cabaret because he already knew he was making the movie. So he was taking it all in,
Hmm.
watching it, seeing what, just living in it. And we had a rehearsal, and Ron had told me that Bob had come to see the show the night before, and he saw him, and Ron canceled the rehearsal because we were closing, and I said, "Oh, Bob Fosse," and he said, "I wanted to tell you that he loved you in the show. He really loved you." And I said, "What did you say?" Because I was like shocked. And he's, I was just dancing all the time, but nobody came backstage and said, "Oh, you're terrific," And he told me that, and he said, "You heard me." And I thought, "Oh, wow, Bob Fosse loved me." Well,
Wow.
anyway, yeah, I went to New York, uh, took a plane. I had a microphone stand, and because I did this number in my act that was uh, Natural Man, it was called. And I did it with a mic. And I called Natural Man Mike. And I did all this stuff with the microphone stand and the mic. And, I thought I was really clever.
Mhm.
And, uh, and I didn't know that Bob liked that kind of stuff. I didn't know. I didn't know that Fosse liked hat tricks and all that. I knew, but I didn't because he was just really getting as popular, from Liza with the Z and Cabaret.
Yeah.
That's when he really, boom, it was like, this is it. He's great, the greatest, you know. Um, so when I walked on stage, it was at the Imperial Theater. Um, Phil Friedman said to me, we don't use amplifications. We don't use amplification in auditions. And I said, well, I know that. This is my prop. And he said, oh, that's good. So I auditioned, and then they said, can you come back at 3? Bob will be here then. So I had to audition for everybody in advance
Mhm.
before he saw me. And when I auditioned, he asked me if I had done everything that I said I did. And I did everything that he wanted. I did the the scenes, and he sat down in front and watched me, and we talked a little bit, and then he said thank you, goodbye. And the next day I got a call that said, we want you to come back, but don't bring any music. Don't, just bring yourself. Don't bring a music. Don't bring your microphone. Just bring yourself. So I did. And that was 2 weeks later. And we went to the Broadway Arts rehearsal studio where he had the room. And Kathy Dobie was there, and Phil Friedman and Bob. And Peter Howard was the accompanist. And Peter is so great. And he had worked on Cabaret with me. So Bob's first thing Bob said was, what are you going to sing? And I said, what? But Mr. Friedman told me not to bring any music. And he said, Phil, you told her that? And I said, but I know a lot of songs. I can sing anything you want me to sing. And he said, do you know any songs from the 1920s and the 1930s? So I said, yeah, I know Lullaby of Broadway. And he said, Peter, what key does she sing in? He said, she sings in Gwen and Chita's key, which was, you know, funny. He said, I remember Lenora when she got off the plane in the 60s to do Cabaret. It was very funny.
Mhm.
It was a wonderful audition. So I improvised, and he had a hat and cane. I did me and my shadow. I asked him if he was using his hat. He said no. I said, "Can I use it?" And your cane, and he let me use it, and I improvised and did whatever it was that I did then. Of course, I did my hat tricks because I knew he'd be impressed, and was hoping he would be. And then I danced, and then he had me sing Funny Honey, and I did it on the piano, which was the way it was done in the original, not like they do it now. And she was drunk, and it was wonderful. So funny. Um, I got back on the plane and I thought, there's a 99% chance I got this job and a 1% chance I don't, because it was really a working audition.
Mhm.
We really connected and we worked. And the next day I got the job. But the most the surprise about the story is there was a soothsayer at a party, a fortune teller
Mhm.
at this party that was like 2 weeks before, well, a month before all this happened with all of it. And I didn't want to talk to her because I was afraid. I didn't want to hear any bad news. And she said, tell the girl who's afraid to talk to me to come. And so I did. And when I went in, she told me that I would leave for New York for one day, pack my bags, and come back. Second trip, pack my bags and come back. The third trip, I would stay. I'd be working with a woman named Ruth or Gwen and a man named Bob. I know, I know. Isn't that wild?
Yes.
Yeah, it happened.
Wow.
She also told me that I'd be working with a man named Tom in a big white building with by the water, and that was the Kennedy Center. And it was at Christmas. It was on Christmas Day that we opened with Bye Bye Birdie. And I said to Tommy right before we went on, I said, oh my God, the soothsayer told me this was going to happen. And he's so, ooh, he loved it. It was great. Yeah. But I
That's,
never told Bob the story about that or
huh.
Gwen, and I wish I had.
As always, I highly encourage you to check out our YouTube channel. There's a video version of every episode if you're more of a visual learner, but beyond that, I've created a playlist of videos that are relevant to each episode. More than anything, I want this podcast to be a gateway or a launching point for you to begin investigating a piece of dance history that you maybe haven't engaged with before. My interviews could never capture the entirety of someone's experience with these great icons of dance, but the conversations we have here can lead to you discovering more. The playlists include old interviews with the dance icon, vintage footage of them dancing, and I've also included links to books that they've written. I try to provide as many avenues as possible for you to continue your own learning experiences. First day of rehearsal. I mean, what was the rehearsal process like? Paint me a picture of the rehearsal room.
Well, everybody had been rehearsing for 2 weeks already. So they knew all that jazz. They knew this was after his heart attack, after he had open heart surgery. I came and sat in the front with a line of people. Everybody watched the rehearsal. Producers, the stage managers. There were a couple of stage men. You know, there's a lot of stage managers on a show, and I just took my notes and I watched everybody. But I watched Gwen, and that's what I did. I sat and watched, and took every note that he gave her, and every note that he gave everybody else too. And that's what I did.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody worked. And Bob would be in the back of the room, looking in the mirror, watching people, work. And I just wrote everything down. And the play changed so much. In rehearsal, every day there was a new song. In rehearsal, every day there were new lines for the Roxie monologue. That monologue changed so much. And it was written by Bob and Herb Gardner, who was a friend of his, the monologue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it was always a problem to get it right.
Yeah.
Uh, it was a lot of I never rehearsed. I rehearsed on my own.
Mm.
Yeah, I never rehearsed. I learned one dance from Tony Stevens when we were out of town, and that was the Honey Rag and Nowadays. Because before that, we did Loop in the Loop and It. They were IT. They were the songs that Nowadays and Honey Rag replaced, because it was a much classier number. Um, and I learned those in the hotel. And I would always rehearse in the lobby. I rehearsed with David Rounds, who was not in the show when we opened on Broadway. He played the agent, and that part was written out. He was a great actor and a Tony Award winning actor. And he would rehearse with me at night. And we would go over all of my scenes. And Barney Martin would go over the scenes with me as Amos. And then I'd rehearse the dances on my own and the songs on my own. And then she got hurt.
So, will you tell me about your debut?
Oh, yes. A couple of weeks before all of this happened, or maybe a week before, I went to cross the street at intermission to get Fred Ebb and all of the producers coffee. They gave me money and they said, why don't you go across the street and get us some coffee and buy yourself a coffee too? And I thought, oh, okay, I can do that, because it's a delicatessen or something with some kind of soda fountain. So I went across the street at intermission to get this coffee, and I was bringing it back in one of those boxes, that you carry all the cups in. And Bob was standing under the marquee smoking a cigarette. And I said, hi, Bob. And he said, what are you doing out here? And I said, oh, I went to get coffee for the producers and Fred. And meanwhile, he's mad at everybody. Okay, he's mad at Fred. He's not speaking to Fred. He's mad at all the producers. He's mad, mad, mad. He's mad. He's not depressed. He's mad. There's a difference. But he also had open heart surgery. And people, in the 70s, that was a lot different than it is now. It was really serious, serious surgery. And how he directed and choreographed that show to begin with, I don't know. He's Superman. Anyway, he said, "Don't you ever leave the theater again. Don't you ever leave the theater again. What do you think? If I find out that you've left this theater, you're standing by for Gwen. She's the star of the show. Don't you ever leave this theater again. If you leave the theater again, I'm going to fire you." I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." And he said, "Give me that coffee." And he took the coffee and he stormed into the lobby, found the producers there. And he said, "What do you think she is? Your delivery girl?" "She's not a delivery girl." He said, "She's the standby. What if something would have happened?" So I'm like, "I'm sorry." And they all got mad at me because he got mad at them. I got caught. It was like little girl on the totem pole.
Mhm.
So fast forward, week later, I'm sitting on the steps with Bobby Fryer, the producer, and he says to me during the Roxie number, "Do you know this show?" I said, "Yes, I do." He said, "Could you do it?" And I said, "Absolutely. I could do it." And he said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Yeah, I could do it." Well, I'll know when I do it, but I know it. I can do it. I can do it. Yeah, sure. And wouldn't you know it? I said, "Why are you asking me that?" And he said, "She's tired." And the numbers said everything, it was changing for Roxy all the time. The dialogue changed every day. I would go into her dressing room afterwards and we would run the dialogue, run her blocking, which was always helpful to me, to learn. I learned so much during that time. It was amazing. And I got to be closer with Gwen, which was great. I mean, she taught me. And they had rehearsal between show and the second show. That was a matinee. Then there was another show. There was rehearsal. And we were all up in the dressing room. All the girls were up in the girls' dressing room. Werner, the hairdresser, was there. He was all that jazz. Right before they went on stage, no one had eaten. And Marcia said, "I'm taking orders." Marcia Bagwell, the other standby for Mary McCarty. Marcia said, "I'm taking orders. I'm going across the street to get things. Do you want to go, Lenora?" I said, "What are you, nuts? Are you crazy? If I step out of the theater during the show, I'm going to get fired. No, I don't want to go." So everybody's on stage. I'm upstairs with Werner. We're talking and laughing, and we hear the end of the number, all that jazz, and then there's nothing. And we hear commotion. And we looked at each other. And I started walking in the Forest Theater. There's the backstage, the dressing rooms are in a different building than the theater. And you go downstairs and walk through an alley and then come upstairs, and there's the theater and backstage. And the basement is where, people dress and things, and you cross over. It's a crossover. Could have said it though. Anyway, I started running and he started running and I ran up the stairs to the stage and all of the lights were red. And Bob Corpora, who was assistant stage manager, said, "Can you do this show?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You haven't had rehearsal. You don't have to." He said, "Can you do it?" I said, "Yes, I can do it." And he said, "Okay." All of a sudden, everybody grabbed me, took me downstairs, started, Graziella Danielle was putting my makeup on. Kathy Doby is going over my lines with me, and she has a German accent, which was really funny. All the people in the show are standing around me, looking at me. They strip me naked. Uh, Helen Tarr's squeezing me into Gwen's costume, and who put my Chita put my wig on. She's pulling it down. Everybody was working with me, and I said, "Let's take it from where I'm going to go on. Just start going over the lines with me." And Jerry Orbach was in his underwear because in the number he strips, so he had what he stripped down to on and smoking a cigar. And everyone was just looking at me. I'll never forget it. And we went upstairs. They all followed me upstairs. Everybody surrounding me. We all went as a group. It was like a cluster of, the minions. We were all together. And Candy was crying. Pam, I think, was crying. They were all crying. We got upstairs. I got on the piano. I heard Bob saying on stage, I found this girl in Pittsburgh. She's from Pennsylvania. She's my new discovery. He set me up good. He really set me up. He said, I trust her to take this, to do this role. And I want you to welcome her. He was so good at setting it up. And I felt so good. When I got on the piano and I almost slid off. And I said, oh, this is slippy, because that's Pittsburghese, And everyone went, huh? And I looked at them and they were all looking at me like, we don't really know you, but do you think you can do this? They were looking at me like that. And I said, don't worry, I won't let you down. And the next thing I knew was off I went, whoop, on the piano. And the next thing I knew, Chita was in the drum with me and she was putting the hat on me to do nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at her and said, I can't believe I'm doing this with you. And she said, well, you are. And the doors opened and we went down and sang, you can like the life you're living. You can live the life you like. So, yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was a moment to behold for me, there I was with one of my idols and someone that I wanted to be like. I wanted to be like her and Gwen, and was doing it. There I was. And the next day, the newspapers had a front page, A Star is Born.
Wow.
And then it said dot, 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 continued on page 3. And you turned the page and it said, almost. Yeah, it was fun. It was great. It was like going to school for 4 years,
What was it that
that
happened to
time.
Gwen in the middle of the show? What
She
happened?
stepped off the bed. Oh, I gotta pee. She
Mm-hmm.
stepped off the bed and her muscle pulled away from the shin bone. Yeah, yeah.
So then
She stepped wrong.
she was out
She
for a
was
little
out.
while
She
then.
was out for the rest of that week. And then we took off for a month and then we started previews again. And she repaired, and that's when we learned, me and my baby was going to be the strut, because there used to be a number, Eddie Cantor number, where everybody was dressed as babies except for her. She was doing an Eddie Cantor kind of thing,
Mhm.
because it was a musical vaudeville. But then they changed to the strut because she wanted to dance more. And so she did the strut with Gene Foot and Paul Solon, two great male dancers who were absolutely incredible and really so gracious to me. Oh, they were so kind to me. Everybody was so kind to me. But that night was when I really became a member of the club. I was accepted. Before that, I was always the girl sitting in the chair, sitting in the corner. You'd look and there I'd be working. But, you know, they didn't get to really, and then I stayed the show
Mm-hmm.
because we didn't have any money to get back there. We had to finish out that week.
When
Yeah. So
when did you debut Velma?
I auditioned for Velma and he gave me the part. And he had told me in Philadelphia, he said, what I'd like to do is have Ann Reinking play Roxie and you play Velma. And I'd forgotten about that, because everything was such a wind at that time, and you forget what people say to you. I auditioned, I got the part, and then I started standing by for her. So when I was standing by, there was an afternoon that he decided that I should do it with Gwen to see what I looked like with her. And so I did. And so that was a day that I did Velma in the afternoon. And then that night, Gwen took off and I played Roxy.
Oh,
And I played both parts in the same day, which was a lot of fun.
yeah,
I
that's
asked him
cool.
if we could. Yeah, it was great. It was great. But I can't remember what day that was. I can't.
Uh,
Uh,
was that difficult at all? Being,
no,
no, not at all.
no,
Second nature.
no, wasn't. It was, when I was younger, I could do all that. Now, if you asked me to do that, I would say, what do you want me? Sometimes I think, how did we do all that stuff? How did we do it? When you get past a certain age, I'm 75.
Mm.
And I never thought about that in my 60s because I was still doing it. But I don't know. Now I don't turn and I don't jump.
How old were you during Chicago?
25,
Hmm.
25, 26, 27. Yeah.
Young.
Yeah.
Tell me more about getting close with Gwen and learning from her and your relationship with her.
I loved Gwen. And I would go to her dressing room. She was so kind to me. She would, uh, she would, when I was standing by for her, I'd go in early and go to her dressing room and she would tell me stories about her life. And she loved doing that. So I kind of sat at her feet, which is really funny. She'd be putting her makeup on because she got there early. And I always liked to get there early, even though I wasn't on the stage. I loved being there. And and I loved being around her.
Hmm.
So even if I were just sitting on the couch and she had guests, she'd always include me, which was so kind. And she would say, Bobby thinks you're terrific. And, you know, and for me to hear that from Gwen was great because you didn't hear that from him that often, because he was busy doing this and that and whatever and not there all the time, but she was there. And of course, Chita was great too. And then when Gwen got hurt again, her vocal cord, she hemorrhaged a vocal cord and Liza came in. So I had to stand by for Liza. And I did, I think, 8 performances, maybe 10. And then Liza came in. So Liza learned the show watching me do it. And so I got kind of close with her too. And I used to go in her dressing room and just hang out, because I got tired of watching the show. Uh, wasn't with Gwen. And
Yeah.
I thought Liza was great, and Liza was Liza, but it was a different show with her. It was like the Liza Minnelli show with Billy Flynn and Velma Kelly.
Wow. Do you
Yeah,
remember? I've heard the stories of, her coming in for her first performance and then it wasn't really publicized at all and not announced.
yeah, yeah.
Were you in the theater? Were you backstage to hear the audience reaction?
I was in the theater, and the audience went like that. And then when they said Liza Minnelli, they went yes. It was like crazy. But
Wow.
when they announced that she was coming into the show, the lines were all the way around 8th Avenue from the 46th Street Theater. It
Mm-hmm.
was incredible when she was there.
Hmm.
And that was fun too because I learned a lot from her in a different way. I watched her, I would talk to her, would ask her, questions about her career, about her life, about her mother and her father. So it was really great. And she was very kind to me.
Mm.
Very kind. And she didn't have to be.
Right.
She's a great gal. She's a great gal. Yeah. What I wanted to tell you was, at that time, the musicians were going on strike. So when they went on strike, there were shows that closed. Had I done the show as a standby for that amount of time, I don't, we wouldn't have reopened.
Yeah.
We needed her. And she sold tickets. It was great. She had a great closing night party. And she invited me and my roommate Joe to her apartment. It was so much fun. Her
Wow.
the one, her favorite people from the show she invited over to
Hmm.
her apartment. It was fun.
If you could, I know it's hard because we're talking about such great, illustrious performers. If you could narrow it down to one lesson or piece of advice, even that you got from Liza, Gwen, and Cheetah, what were your main takeaways from working with them?
Well, you work hard. It's hard work. So you have to, it's so all encompassing. I can't say one thing. I I know this, that when you're working hard and you're really working hard and you know you're doing good work, it's more fun than anything, you know? And if it's not fun, then something's wrong. And what I learned about them was that they always had fun. They were always kind backstage and they always had fun. And they always made sure that the other people on stage had fun too. There was never any, I'm better than you kind of attitude or any kind of, you know, you could be fired because if I don't like you, or, if if you're too good. None of that. None of that. If you were good, come on, we're going to take you. And Liza was like that too. Talent loves talent. And, we were all in it together. And that was what the thing about Chicago was so great. We were all in it together. It was a company and we were all there for each other. There was never any backstabbing. There was never any jealousy. We were all there. And I think it was because of Bob, because he was in charge of everything. When he directed, what he said went, you didn't question it because he knew what he was talking about. And he had done his work so thoroughly. He really was a creative genius. People used to call him in just to look at their plays, not even their musicals, but their plays to to give them the okay or say, what do you think I need? What could make this better? Because he was always trying to make things better. Everything always needed to be better. It could always be better. So, he always said, never compete with anybody, compete with yourself, you know, and that's the truth. And there was always it was everything was character driven. Acting was so important and you had to do 120%. 120%. Yeah, no marking ever.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah. And it was all repetition. But with Bob, it didn't matter because anytime you did it, there was always a note. There was always a note to make you better. So you didn't mind working hard. Yeah, he was brilliant. There
Mm.
was nobody like him. No one like him. And no one like Gwen and no one like Chita. They were, I could talk about them all day. I could talk about them. I could talk about Chicago all day. All of the people in the show, all of those women
Hmm.
and the guys, they were great.
Tell me more about, you're talking about the camaraderie of the cast. Did you have any cast traditions or backstage traditions?
No,
No?
no. We just went in and had a great time and did our show.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
talked to Pamela Sousa last week, and she said that there was always a game of cards going.
Oh, Jerry Orbach.
Uh-huh.
Jerry played cards through the whole show. He played cards. He drank a fifth of vodka, not vodka, scotch. If it was, yeah, if it was, he'd gargle with it and then he'd spit it out and go and do his opening number. All I care about is love.
Uh-huh.
He was, he was such a wonderful performer. He was so strong on stage. His presence was magnificent. It was so magnifying. I mean, he was so good. Yeah. I
Hmm.
learned a lot from him too. He used to love to gamble. Yeah. And he had a game, the Tonkers, they played Tonk. He, Ron Schwinn, and Gary Gendell and his dresser.
Tell me what you remember about Tony Night from that year.
I didn't go to Tony Night, but I do remember that unfortunately Cheetah had to go and she was sick. She had the flu. She had the flu. And we didn't win anything.
Did you
I
watch?
watched it. I watched it on TV. I didn't want to go.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, but we didn't win anything. Everything was taken by a chorus line,
Yeah.
which is interesting because it was really at that time very popular and Chicago wasn't. It was popular because of Bob and because of performances. And if people saw it and they loved it, they would come back and see it.
Hmm.
But it wasn't the hit that it is now
Right.
because it was so ahead of its time.
Hmm.
I don't think people understood it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it was fun to watch it change in Philadelphia because it went through a lot of changes. The
Tell me
courtroom
more.
scene when they had blood in it. No, it was, there was blood in the courtroom scene. It was like, yeah, it was crazy. I loved it.
Wow. All right. So then, how long until the cast changeover when Annie came in and you took over Velma? When did
I
that?
took over Velma and Chita had left in July. I think it was July 26th that I took over. That's the date that I remember right now.
Mhm.
Uh, and I took over with Gwen. So
Oh,
I did it with Gwen.
wow.
Yeah. Now that was fun. That was really fun. That was really fun.
Wow.
And I
Getting
had a great time with her. A great time with Gwen.
That's so special, getting to perform with your idol.
I know. I know. And I learned, I just, was amazing.
Do you have anything from her? Did she ever give you any gifts, or do you have any special mementos from her?
She gave me a little box that was like this little round box that had like a little flower on it, that you put things in, just like your ring or something. Um, but that's, and I lost it. I
Oh,
don't have it anymore. Bob gave me, Bob had a Hirschfeld made for me. Yeah, he had a single Hirschfeld made for me. So that was put in the newspaper, and and he made a portrait of me and Ann Reinking as Velma and Roxie. And he gave it to me when I worked with Peter Allen. It was a line drawing, a artist. I don't know who the artist was. And when Annie came in, things changed because she's different from Gwen, and I was different from Cheetah. There were things that I did that Cheetah didn't do
hmm.
because Bob wanted to, make it for the person doing it. That's the way he always worked.
Like what?
Well, like Velma takes a stand. There were a couple of things that I did that she didn't do.
Okay.
Like I would jump off the chair differently and do one thing that she didn't do backwards. And yeah. And the Roxy number changed when Annie went. She danced a little bit more. Yeah. I had fun with Ann. I had a great time with Gwen. But Annie and I had done cabaret together. So you know, and we were the same age. Her birthday was November 10th, and she was born in 1949. My birthday was November 11th, and I was born in 1949.
Mm.
So it was 10, 11, and then Elena Reed came in, who replaced Mary McCarty. She was November 12th.
Oh, wow.
I know, 10, 11, 12.
Huh.
Isn't that wild?
That is.
I know. We had a ball.
I bet.
We did. We laughed and laughed. We used to laugh a lot. We laughed a lot during that show backstage.
Mm.
Everybody was happy, and I don't think that that's the way it is with other shows. Maybe it is now. I don't know. Some of the shows that I've done on Broadway since then, not that much fun.
Mm.
Not as much fun.
If you like the work being done here at Immortal Icons of Dance, there are several ways you can support. The easiest ways are to subscribe to the podcast and share the episodes when you enjoy them. You can join the Vault to gain exclusive access to a large collection of dance history ephemera that I've curated just for you. This includes historic photos, footage, quotes, articles, and more. Your support allows me to continue researching and preserving this history that we all love so much. So in the 1996 revival with choreography by Ann Reinking in the style of Fosse, that show's been running now on Broadway for 29 years, allowing millions of people to enjoy the show. How have you seen the legacy and the meaning of Chicago grow or change over the last 50 years?
I think people understand the story now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, after O.J. Simpson. you know After that, people started to understand the story. It was very pertinent. In the 70s, everybody wanted, that was Bob's answer to Watergate. And in the 70s, people didn't want to know about that. They wanted, happy days are here again, because Nixon was, out and we were doing, they wanted to see happy things on Broadway. They didn't want to think about anything. I think the choreography, when I see it, I like Bob's version better
Hmm.
because it is Bob and it was a musical vaudeville. I like in the style of Bob Fosse, but I think down through the years since 96, it's gotten watered down and things are different than, and the intention of what they're doing. I
Yeah.
don't know if they know why they're doing things,
Mm.
because there's always a meaning behind the choreography.
Hmm.
He and I used to work on 50 different reasons why you would do something, 100 different reasons why you would do something or say something.
Hmm.
And that was fun. I think it's great
Hmm.
that it's running.
Hmm.
And I love Chicago. I love it. And I love this production too. But it's not the same. It's
Right.
not the same.
What misconceptions do people have about Fosse or his choreography?
I think they think it's small movements and just these hand movements, and jazz hands. And it's not. I mean, you really have to go back in history and study it. When we did Chicago, those numbers were very difficult to do. They were hard.
Hmm.
They were hard. It was hard dancing. And you had to be a dancer, you had to be funny, and you had to be an actress to be able to do it. And you had to be a strong dancer, not just a dancer, but very strong dancers. And those girls were all strong dancers. Graciela Danielle, Pamela Sousa, Cheryl Clark, Candy Brown, Michonne Peacock, they were the cream of the crop. Also, they think he was depressed all the time, and he wasn't.
How would you say that you've kept his work or his spirit alive in your own career, especially when working with younger performers or coaching dancers?
I love to teach and pass on.
Hmm.
I love to pass on what Bob taught me and Gwen taught me and what Chita taught me. And it's just to be mindful of what we do. I like to just, when I see somebody doing Fosse choreography and they're not doing it, I'll step in and say, would you mind if I suggest that you do this or that? And this is what this is about. There's a lot of focus in your hand. Just because your hand is limp doesn't mean that it's limp. It looks limp. Let's feel it. You got to focus. Focus is different than tension.
Mm.
Yeah. So there's a lot that's involved, and there's all different parts of your body moving at the same time, which is so much fun. But it really is fun when you get it,
Mm.
once it clicks and you got it, you go, wow, I'm a Fosse dancer. There was nothing like it because he made sure that you were so confident when you went on stage that the house could catch on fire and you wouldn't forget anything. You just keep going.
When you told me the story about you leaving for coffee and getting caught and him being upset by that,
Yeah.
what I hear in the background is a fierce protectiveness of Gwen, of
Yes.
like the anger towards you was his fear or anger that if something were to happen to her and you're not around. Um, so I'm curious, how did he show that to his dancers? Because it, like you said, it doesn't always come across with great job, but how did he show his care for his dancers?
He wasn't mad at me. He was mad at them,
Mm.
the producers.
Hmm.
I knew that. I knew once he went in and told them off. Uh, he wasn't mad at me.
Hmm.
He just told me directly what would happen if
Yeah.
I left the theater. For me, in my own personal experience with him, when I started working with him, he saw me do the part. I rehearsed with him the next day after I had done it because he was at the hospital with Gwen. I rehearsed all day, and then at 6 o'clock we quit, and I did the show. And at intermission, he came back and he said, the Roxie monologue worked. You did everything I asked you to do and more. And then he gave me his shoes because I had tennis shoes on. And I said, I got, he said, are you wearing those for me and my baby? And I said, yeah, that's all I have. I have my sneakers. They were Keds, you know. And he said, you can't wear those. You can't wear those. He said, I have an extra pair of shoes. And he got the shoes, and I was praying. I said, God, please make them be big, too big. Please make them be too big, because I have big feet anyway. And thank God they were too big. So I put two pairs of socks on, and I wore them anyway because I we didn't have any shoes for me for that number. And he came back after the show, and he stood behind me and looked in the mirror, and he said, you do everything I ask you to do and more. And you did it. He said, every note I gave you, you did. And then you added you, and you did things that I didn't even think of. And he said, this works. He told me. He would tell people. But I think he told us individually, you know, like Michonne told me about a time that he said to her, I'm going to, if you stick around, I'll work with you and then we'll discuss this. And I know how much he cared about her, that he did that for her. You know, he, he really cared for people who were on the stage. He loved actors. He loved dancers. And the day that he died, you know, I was in that Sweet Charity tour. The day that he died, he said things to us individually and as a group that were so kind and thoughtful and fatherly like he was about to move on to someplace else. It was really that day was really a different day. It was a different day. He looked great. He was tan. He was upbeat. He looked terrific. And we were rehearsing in the theater, but in the lobby of the theater. And he told me he loved me during the note session. I mean, he wouldn't have said that in a normal day, you know, normal note session. It was great. I sat next to him during a scene, and Donna and I were doing. She was doing a scene with Vittorio Vidal, and then he asked me to get up and do a scene with Donna, and I did. And he said, Donna, let me do this. I want to show you what I want. And he got up and he played Charity and I was Nikki. And I could tell that he really enjoyed doing that. He felt he had fun, you know, and I had fun. And it was so wonderful. And that night, after we did I Love to Cry at Weddings, I was walking backstage and I had to walk from stage right to stage left after the number. And I heard in my head, he asked me to do something. I cried. He said, can you cry in that scene? I said, I don't know. I'll try. I'll try. He said, well, go down inside and find a reason. Find the reason. And I did. And I cried. And I thought, oh, I can't wait to talk to him about this after the show. And when I thought that, I thought, this thought came into my head. You always do what I ask you to do and more. And I got goosebumps, you know, my heart was full. And then we found out at the end of the show that he had passed away before the show. And it was awful. But it was like that whole day was different when in hindsight, in hindsight. And I know there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about them. They were really important in my life, especially in at a point in his life where I came into his life and he came into mine. He had just had open heart surgery, so he survived that. Then he went on to do other things, and I happened to be placed there. So there's a reason why I was there, and I was there for the end. And in my journey, and his, Gwen's, you know, uh, They're very important figures in my life, and my heart is full with them. And that's what they were all about. It's all, you got to have heart.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of your wonderful stories with me.
I'm sorry I talked so long. It's like,
No, not at all. That's what we're here to do. I want to open up this platform for people to be able to share their stories so that they can be preserved and so that more people can learn from them and be inspired by them. All right, well, have a great day. Enjoy.
you have a great day.
The Immortal Icons of Dance podcast is written, edited, and produced by me, Lauren Johnson. Our music is written and produced by Shelby Rassler of Jenkins and Rassler, and technical support is provided by Anne-Marie Johnson and Jenny Albrecht. Major support for this season of the podcast was provided by Robert Schulman. I also wish to thank sponsors Zahif, Jenny, Margarita, Natalie, Mary, Liz, Jean, and Denise. If you'd like to support the work being done here by Immortal Icons of Dance, visit immortaliconsofdance.com/donate.